All right, now we're going to do 13.5 factor by grouping. So there's two different types of examples when we factor by grouping, and they have to deal with the sign in the middle, okay? So if the sign in the middle between all four terms is a positive, then how you're going to approach this is you're going to group the first two factors, skip the sign, group the second two factors. Now you're going to pull out the GCF from each group. So in the first group, I can pull out a 3, and that leaves me with y minus 7, plus I can pull out an x, and that leaves me with y minus 7. Now this should look familiar because the last problem that we ended on in the section prior to this was written in this format. And so now I have a new GCF, and that GCF happens to be y minus 7, which I'm going to write first. I'm going to factor out my GCF, and then my other factor is created by what's in front of the parentheses. Now, I could FOIL this to check it. It doesn't matter what order it's in. If I take y times 3, I get 3y. If I take y times x, I get xy. If I take negative 7 times 3, I get negative 21. And if I take negative 7 times x, I get negative 7x, which is what I started with. Okay? So now we're going to do group the first two, skip the sign, group the second two. So in the first group, I can pull out an x. That leaves me with x plus 1. I can pull out a y in the second group, and that leaves me with x plus 1. So now I have a new GCF that I write one time, and my other factor comes by what's in front of those parentheses. Now, the other two examples have a minus sign in the middle. And that's going to add one additional step. So what we're doing essentially is that we are factoring out a negative. So in order to factor out a negative, this last term is going to change signs. I'm going to group the first two, skip the minus sign, and group the second two. Now, I'm not changing the problem because that minus times the minus that I wrote above is equal to the positive 6. So I'm literally factoring out a negative of that second group. And then I'm going to follow the rules as I did above. I'm going to take out the GCF of x squared. That leaves me with x minus 2. Write the minus sign. I'm going to take the GCF of 3, and that leaves me with x minus 2. If you happen to get a different thing in parentheses, then that means that you have not factored it out correctly, or that it's not factorable. You have to get the same thing in parentheses to move forward. So my new GCF is x minus 2, and my other factor is x squared minus 3. Now, it really doesn't matter what order you put those factors in. I always put my GCF first, but if you have x squared minus 3 times x minus 2, that's perfectly fine, okay? So on the last one, I see that I've got a negative sign in the middle, so I'm going to change this sign to the opposite. I'm going to group the first two, skip the minus sign, and group the second two. Pull out my GCF of 2x squared, and that leaves me with x minus 7. Write the minus sign and pull out a 3. And that leaves me with x minus 7. So my GCF, I write one time, and my other factor comes from what's in front. And that's how we factor with grouping.